Hello and welcome to Ticket Manager's All Access interview series, engaging leaders from across the sports marketing spectrum to identify and explore critical issues in the business of sports, entertainment, sponsorship, activation, ticketing, hospitality, and even more. I'm your host, Jim Andrews. Joining me on this episode is Michael Schreiber, founder and CEO of Playfly Sports. Michael's career has come full circle from his earlier years in advertising sales supporting the NBC Sports and Olympics properties to a phenomenally successful career across new media, content, and digital platforms at NBC Universal, Comcast, and the founding of Hulu before forming and leading Playfly for the last 2.5 years. Michael, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Great. Thanks for having me, Jim. Excited to be here.
Great.
Talking with you.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure that many of our listeners are familiar with some, if not all of the segments of the sports business that Playfly is in, and we can actually see those behind you and your great graphics there. But if you wouldn't mind just giving us a quick overview of the Playfly story and how you built the company, what it looks like today, I think that would be a great place to start.
Yeah, Playfly, we're 2.5 years old, as you mentioned. So we're still a newbie when it comes to our brand in the marketplace. Still gaining awareness of what the Playfly brand means, but the businesses that make up Playfly have been around for 20, 30 years. So we're multiple decade type heritage in terms of what we do. But we built a company over the last 2.5 years by buying a number of longstanding businesses in the sports industry, by putting puzzle pieces together to be able to represent a significant number of different services for sports organizations. And that's really the goal of Playfly Sports, is to provide services really to the teams, leagues, conferences, and networks of the sports world and the sports industry. So we are actually a marketing agency and a sports agency that focuses less on the athlete and more on the actual sports organization. So our focus tends to be on the actual team, the athletic department, the TV network, the conference, the league. And that really those are the services that we want to excel at and really drive value for our partners. So that's how we built the company, building asset by asset, acquiring businesses, building new businesses to now, which is the foundation of Playfly Sports. And we've actually been able to build very quickly inside the pandemic, which is interesting and fun, when really we put extra fuel to the fire when sports went dark in 2020 and said, hey, let's go even quicker. Because we knew that, from our vantage point in the way the world works, is that pandemics are temporary and sports are forever. And so we wanted to double down on our vision for Playfly Sports and our support for the sports industry and each of our partners across the board. So we thought, what a better time than when everybody's in need of help. Let's build the business and let's enter the market. We know sports is going to be robust for, I would say decades, but I would say centuries, forever. The sports is never going to end. And even if you go back to ancient cultures, sports was always a part of their lives going way back. So we're happy to be in the sports industry and excited to lead in a number of categories as we continue to grow.
Michael, with your extensive media background, and I just touched on some highlights in the intro, you've said that Playfly's key strategy, and I'm going to quote you, is getting sports properties to operate more like media companies in order to create value. I would love to explore that a little bit more with you and just have you talk about just how big that opportunity is. And are we talking about acting like media brands in terms of things like the use of data to produce the right content, optimize ad inventory, all of that? Is that one of the ways to think and act like a media company?
Yeah, we do. We believe the future of being a sports organization is going to come with a lot of the expertise that you see from traditional media companies. And the thought pattern behind that is, at the end of the day, talking to audiences, talking to fans is the core goal of many sports organizations, most sports organizations. It's building that engagement with their fans and thus turning that engagement into revenue and long-term fandom for their organizations. And when you think about that, and then you parallel that to, let's just say, a TV show or a movie, it's the same thing at the end of the day. So when you think about how do you promote, how do you message, how do you get your marketing set up the right ways, it all comes from the traditional media company elements of promotion, engagement, audience building. So if you think about all of those elements and you translate it and say, okay, how do I talk to a pro team about this? Well, it's interesting. It comes with those same sort of tenets at the end of the day, which are sometimes new to individuals in the ecosystem, but a lot of teams are really experimenting and doing really interesting things in this space. But I would say the first biggest category when it comes to a sports team is content, right? And not only just thinking like a media company, but actually producing content and delivering it in interesting ways. And so obviously there's a significant amount of teams producing social media content and delivering that to their fans, which is exciting, and a lot of work going into that across the sports ecosystem. But you can take these content experiences even further, from the point where you can actually create full-length documentaries, follow docs, whether it's historical stories, whether it's current stories about the players leading up to the playoffs and how they're interacting and how they're getting prepared. A whole bunch of story arcs in terms of storytelling to create more content. You could take it even further and take all of the great content that's been produced this year, whether social media, et cetera, and build a linear experience. So you can have a 24/7 experience for that content provider. You can go an even step further and create subscription offerings where you're providing significant behind the scenes content available to your super fan. So there's all these really interesting ways just based off of one concept, which is content. I'll throw one other out there as well that we participate in. And again, we are a service provider. So we actually not only produce the content, we create the platforms to distribute the content, we create the methodologies and the marketing support for delivering subscription services for teams. So all of those elements are part of the services of Playfly Sports. And that's why we get excited about it. And I get excited about it personally, because these are areas that we can actually help instantly turn teams' experiences into more media company-like opportunities to drive those audiences and drive that fandom. The other is what you mentioned, Jim, which is data. Data is a significant driver for figuring out and learning, first off, about your fan. So who's your fan? How did they become a fan? When did they become a fan? Why did they become a fan? So one of the most interesting elements, and it's very different depending on what area within sports you think about. So for example, your fandom for pro sports is based on the geography you grew up in. You traditionally get your fandom for pro sports at age 7. You usually get it from your parents, your town. It is really connected to that specifically. Then you ask the question, well, what about one of the other biggest categories in the US, which is college sports? Well, how do you get your college sports fandom? Obviously, everybody thinks, well, where you went to college. Sure. Well, a lot of people went to colleges that may not have had big sports programs, et cetera. So where do you get your college fandom? For where you went, of course, is going to be the first, But there's many other categories: where you live, where your own kids went to school, where your best friend went to school. So really interesting elements when you just start looking at the data and how fandom is developed. You start with that type of learning and that type of insights. And Playfly Insights is very much focused on driving these types of knowledge base exercises for our partners. And then you take that and then you flip it and you say, okay, well, how do I start creating these profiles for my fans? And how do I start understanding who they are? And how did they get their fandom? Why are they fans? Are they local fans? Or are they not local fans? So for example, on average, about 50% of the fans, sometimes over 50% of the fans, never are going to have been or in the future going to be in your stadium.
Right.
So that's just a really interesting element when you talk about fandom. So, okay, how do you harness that data? How do you separate those two segments? How do you take a segment of fans that are local or have the opportunity or are interested in being in the stadium and the venue? And how do you segment the fans that aren't? Right? Being able to do that and know your audiences and then be able to tailor the message, right? What type of content, what type of messaging, what type of marketing, what type of ticketing offers do you make? If you're making ticketing offers for the fans that aren't local, who aren't really going to have an intention of being in that venue, you have a significant amount of waste. So thinking about all those elements and how you do that is something that we're very focused on for our business. And then we actually bring a significant amount of advertiser interest into these sports organizations. And we can use that same data, that same first party data from the team to enhance the advertising revenues, because it's really what the advertisers are looking for, is how to get in front of those fans. At the same time, they're having that emotional experience with their favorite team and really experiencing deep fandom, is the same time the advertiser wants their brand to be seen. And our research shows that connectivity is one of the most valuable tools in all of marketing.
you and I know and work with a lot of folks in team sports, and you know, is the message getting through? Because I think for a lot of years, and again, love all of those folks, and know and work with a lot of them. But I think for a while, it was a fair statement to say that sports organizations were a little behind the curve when it came to adopting some of these things. Is that but to me, I think I'm seeing more of an evolution there in terms of the way they think about that, and you would see that even more than I do. So is that message of, hey, you need to do business differently, you need to concentrate on things like content and data, really resonating and getting through to the teams?
Yeah, so I think a majority of teams, the intention is there, the understanding is there. In terms of the expertise, I think they're still working out, whether they have it in house or need to utilize third parties. That's the evolution that I think is going to happen here, and that's what we're trying to provide as a stable alternative to outsource a lot of these efforts for the teams. Because if you think about it, and you go and you sit down with the team, and we work with majority of the teams, the pro teams, and a large swath of the college teams in the U.S. So we have a lot of these experiences. And when we talk to the teams, there is a lot of confidence that they know this and they already have some strategies in place. When you really dig into some of the strategies, are they really utilizing the most effective and most efficient models? Not always. So that's where we really find the most interesting opportunities, is to help a team that really has the intention, already has initiatives kicked off, and actually help them drive much more value out of those initiatives and take some of the weight and the cost off of their side of the business, and utilize all of our best practices, whether it's Playfly Insights, we have a full creative services team that can help actually build and develop. We have a production company. We produce the content for some of these teams ourselves. So really, all of those services extend out, that we get to create the efficiencies of doing multi-team services. So it allows us to offer inexpensive opportunities to drive content for teams. And then we have award-winning producers that work here as well, who have track records of producing long-form documentaries. So sometimes the stuff we produce is so amazing, we'll actually pitch it to the ESPNs, HBOs, Netflixes of the world, and actually end up with content that goes on air as well.
And with all of those different businesses and units that you have at Playfly, I'm wondering, is there some crossover or cross-selling between those different units? Like, for example, would the folks at Home Team Sports share some of the insights that they've learned about a brand that they may be working with the folks on the college sports side? Or are you ever bundling some of your properties that you represent together, across some of those verticals?
Yeah, it's a great question. So one of the cool things about the way our business is structured, not only are we significantly in pro sports, we're also in college sports, one of the top leaders, really the fastest growing college sports player in the US. And then we actually have a business in high school sports. We have a business in esports. And when you think about it, at the end of the day, there's multiple different levels of priorities when you think about a marketer and how they want to come in and utilize the services of the fandom from a team. And this is something that we can cross-pollinate across all of those platforms. So if you think about it, for example, or all of those parts of the sports industry, if you think about it from a brand's perspective, a brand says, hey, I want to get in front of people at their moment of passion, the time when they're sitting there waiting for the bottom of the ninth and what's the batter going to do, or whether it's the last second buzzer shot from the basketball player, or it's the third period in a tied hockey match. Like, what is that moment? There's always going to be that moment of passion. How does the advertiser get there? Well, the interesting thing is we've set up our company to allow for us to be able to work with advertisers and get them embedded in different types of sports. So whether it's the different pro leagues, whether it's college, whether it's high school, whether it's esports, one advertiser can get their message throughout all those experiences with one conversation, and that's through Playfly Sports. So we've actually been able to do significant cross-league deals. Not only that, we've actually been able to do cross-medium deals as well. So if you think about it, as you mentioned, our Home Team Sports, our linear TV business, we actually sell into the TV live broadcasts for our partners, for our team and network partners. We also sell into the live streams for our digital partners. And then we also then sell in venue and experiential. and all of the more in-person type and game day type opportunities. So we can actually provide an advertiser not only cross league, but cross medium deals in a way that they've never been able to buy with one partner on one invoice before. So it's really an interesting cross-selling environment that it's something that a league itself doesn't typically do because they focus on their sport.
Right.
It's something that a conference itself doesn't typically do because they focus on their conference. It's something that even college sports doesn't typically do because they focus on college sports. So we can actually tap in and drive value across the board. And we actually have this team, we call it partner development, that sits above all of our businesses and helps achieve that by listening to the advertisers, their agencies, and their goals. And that team then says, okay, if this is your goal, let me show you something interesting, probably something you have never seen before, which is a proposal, which includes pro sports, college sports, high school sports, and esports, and multiple different mediums, all in one buy to achieve your goal of connecting with the fan at the point of passion.
And you could see why that would be very attractive to the buyers out there to be able to do that all at once. Obviously, Playfly is very much involved with regional sports networks right now, a sector that is certainly having its share of challenges thanks to cord cutting and other factors. I'd just love to get your take on all that, not just the Diamond Sports situation or others, but just where do you think we're going in terms of local team broadcasts?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's really interesting. We obviously, being the leader in selling advertisements for brands in behalf of the teams and the TV networks, we're obviously a key partner in the RSN ecosystem. So for us, it's a really interesting evolutionary time in that space, and providing, whether it's content or ad sales services, sponsor services, technology, whatever it is, to those organizations, RSNs, and the teams themselves. It's really an interesting question. The one thing that I go back to constantly is the point I made a little earlier in this discussion, which is sports are forever. So if you think about it, what's happening right now, and if you just look and use the most prevalent statistics you can find, which is, let's just say, Nielsen ratings. If you look in any market in the US, and really if you just aggregate it across the whole US and look at all the local markets and aggregate it across the US, you will see that local sports viewership of those three leagues that sit inside of the RSN ecosystems, that's MLB, NBA, and NHL, are the top viewed content in every market on an aggregated basis across the US. More than news, more than primetime broadcast television, you name it, it's number one. So when you think about that for a second, and you think about sports are forever, and you put those two things together, this is a really valuable piece of the sports ecosystem. So, and then you think, okay, well, why are we having these ups and downs inside of that industry? Well, it's really because the pioneers in the industry saw that value 20, 30 years ago and decided to embed that value into cable subscriptions over the last 20, 30 years, right? And very smartly, right? Because at the end of the day, now everybody in the US, or at least at the height of cable penetration, everybody in the US had these channels. They had the option. So it was really interesting. So for the last 20, 30 years, you could probably say the cable ecosystem helped the sports industry create more fandom than probably anything else that's out there, because the channel was there. And when the kid turned 7 and he wanted to sit next to his father at 8 p.m. and watch his TV show or watch a TV show, or his mother, they flipped on the game and boom, that kid became a fan. And now you cycle that up till now, right? Cable penetration, the way people watch content is different, right? It's just different. So, but the one thing that hasn't changed is that appetite for the game. So the cool thing about that is that's still a forever thing. So we're going to see people, we already do right now with streaming, a significant amount of people are shifting from the traditional TV experience to the streaming experience. And that still happens to sometimes be on the TV screen, just to be clear, even though it's coming through a different modality of streaming. But ultimately, all these new habits, new constructs are going to develop out of these models. I mean, at some point, we're going to be watching the game on our refrigerator screen. I guarantee it. As you walk to the refrigerator to get your late night snack, you're going to have the screen on that refrigerator and still watching the game. So the modality of how it works, the business model that sits behind it is all going to change. And that's what we're seeing the evolution of right now. is the business model of cable subscriptions propped up the value of those rights. Cable subscriptions start going down, that needs to be reevaluated. So it's all sort of business deal based, but there's no change in the fandom. There's no change. It's still the number one viewed content, as I mentioned. So the cool thing about it is, yeah, there's a lot of smart people trying to figure out how to rework some of those business deals. But at the end of the day, those games are going to be played. Those games are going to be watched. And those games are going to have natural breaks, whether it's a timeout, an inning break, or whatever it is. And we're going to help monetize those breaks with the amazing partners we have in the advertising world.
And then you and I talked earlier, there's also, and you alluded to this before, just talking about content, it's not just the live broadcasts that can be monetized anymore. So when you're looking at it from the advertiser standpoint or the sponsor standpoint, it's, maybe the as you said, there'll always be breaks. There'll always be an opportunity to buy a billboard or a 30-second or a 15-second spot or something like that. But as time goes on, we're seeing more and more of the monetization coming through co-branded or content and things like that. Are you seeing that as well?
Habits are changing significantly. I'll just give you one anecdote. I was traveling recently and asked my son, "Did you watch the game last night?" He said, "No, but I watched the cut down this morning. It was 10 minutes. And I'm like, what does that mean? Right? So educate me. Yeah. And when you think about it, that's content. Going back to some of the content we're talking about is the folks that have the rights are creating condensed version of the games for different audiences. So my 15-year-old likes to watch the game in 10 minutes. Okay, get him what he wants. So the interesting element, I like to sit down and watch a game, whether if it's regular season, it sometimes is just on in my house. If it's playoffs, I'm on the edge of my seat in my house. But so I might have a different type of attention on the different games. But
right.
But at the end of the day, that's me, right? And I'm of a certain, generation. But the ultimate factor is everybody's going to experience and everybody's going to look for the way they watch and get their content in different ways. You even have athletes as influencers now. So the interesting thing is you actually sometimes care about the person almost as much as you care about their performance. So there's different elements of consuming that team, that athlete, that content that are starting to arise. So the cool thing about that is as you think about those cut downs or even just the highlights of these games and how they're presented and distributed, we're now seeing actually this opportunity when you look at it from a commercial lens, which is what our key focus is for most of our partners, is you're actually creating more opportunities for impressions. So what's ending up happening is you still got the game, it's still number one on TV and streaming, so you still got that, but then either during the game sometimes, but most likely after the game, you have all these other versions inside of the experience that ends up happening, giving yourself a new set of impressions, and usually different impressions when it comes to advertising. So for example, the cut downs, you're going to get a much younger audience, right? I was talking about my 15-year-old son, right? So if you're targeting 18 to 34-year-olds, you should be advertising in the cut downs. If you're talking about highlights, right, that tends to be, 20 to 4-year-olds. So you're talking about 18 to 49-year-old audience, right? And if you're talking about traditional television or streaming, it's a wide variety, but you have that sort of 18 to 54 bracket, and even more so the 25 to 54 bracket that's using, the modality of traditional television. So the cool thing about it is you can not only get more impressions, but you actually see the breakdown in different age brackets. So based on what your brand is targeting, you can end up, going after the right, the right category. So if you're a car company, right, and you're presenting the luxury car, you're going to go after that 25 to 50-year-old target audience and hit them on the modality that they're watching. And if you're, a sort of inexpensive, sporty kind of type vehicle, even from the same advertiser, you can then segment your audience to go after that 18, to 35-year-old audience that's using the cut down modality to get their gain. So it's pretty cool.
It is, and and I think some of these developments too. I have recently, even at my advanced age, discovered the condensed games on the MLB app, which I love. That's my thing every morning. If I haven't got to see my Mets, a full broadcast, that's the first thing I do in the morning. That condensed game in 10 minutes, I love it. And again, if somebody my age is discovering that, that probably means that others will too. So we'll broaden those demographics at some point.
So it's exciting. It actually adds more impressions, adds more touch points, more interactivity, more fandom can be created, and in more places, right? Whether it's your phone, whether it's your social media stream, whether it's even now using a lot of, like, even in metro billboards now have video capabilities. So it's pretty. There's it's just a wild time, and it gives us the ability to present content in a way that the consumers are consuming it.
When you look at the revenue pie for pro sports leagues and teams, the different pieces, media rights, tickets, licensed products, sponsorships, media has always accounted for the lion's share for most, especially in the traditional stick and ball sports. A little bit different. We talk about things like NASCAR and other properties. But given some of the changes that we've been talking about, do you think that there's going to be kind of a significant change to the kind of the size of those slices, how that revenue is divided if we look out 5 or 10 years?
Yeah, I think you do see that. Well, right now there's a few things that are happening that are interesting, and I'm sure you talk about this quite a bit, and I've heard in some of your other podcasts you utilizing this as a narrative, which is very true, is that actually hospitality is something that's really changing in sports. And there's low end and there's high end, right? And there's everything in the middle. But really giving a fan a little bit more of an experience at the end of the day is something that I think is going to go a long way and people are going to pay for. So the one thing that we've learned is that sort of your fandom is relatively inelastic. So when you think about ticket pricing, when you think of even dynamic pricing, and right, I mean, we actually have a service that we help provide around dynamic pricing of tickets and different types of events pricing that we provide even at Playfly Sports. And you just see it when you think about a perspective, like even an indoor sport, take a hockey match. If it's a sunny day, you're going to get more people to the stadium, even though it's an inside sport, right? It's just those types of variables really actually affect sales. So demand goes up, and that inelasticity, right? So your prices should change probably in a positive way on a sunny day. Right? The opposite. Let's say it's a rainy day, a baseball game, and those seats are outside uncovered. Obviously, those should go down, right? So it should be dynamically set to maximize both attendance and revenue. But when you think about that and you think about hospitality, that experience at the end of the day is really going to be important to provide to the fans. And then you go all the way up to the high end, and it gets even more inelastic, where it's companies hosting their favorite and most important partners. That is a really inelastic area where you can create much more revenue. They want a white glove experience. They want a low friction experience. Sometimes they don't even watch the game, which is interesting and kind of ironic. But they're having a nice time at the ballpark with their partners, and that interaction. It's almost like the country club of years past, right? You sign up to 4 country clubs as a leader of a company so you could take all your clients out, right? But why don't you sign up to 4 hospitality packages at your local pro teams in a market instead and take your clients out there? That's probably a more exciting experience for a lot of clients than the country club. So if you think about it, that and providing those experiences and making sure they're low friction and white glove experiences for the high end, that inelasticity of price is going to create more opportunities for sports organizations to change and tilt. Going back to your original question, the amount of dollars that come in, whether it's media rights centric or there's other ways to create more value here. So I do believe that the evolution that we're seeing right now in sports and creating an experience for fans and partners and companies alike is going to drive and tilt the model towards other categories, match day, game day type revenue categories.
Yeah, I think that's really insightful. And as you said, I think there's more conversation happening about that. I've had guests from the NBA talking about that. So I think you're really onto something there. Michael, you've been very generous with your time and really appreciate this. Just as a last question, I'd love to ask you what's next for Playfly Sports.
So our goal is to actually add more services to our offerings. So one of the areas we just spent a bunch of time talking about is game day services. So thinking about hospitality, thinking about ticketing, and how do we drive that, right? If we're providing technology, if we're providing content services, if we're providing media sales services, we're providing all the legs of the stool data, fan data, and insight services, we think we can actually help drive match day and game day revenue in a really unique fashion here at Playfly Sports. So that's an area we're going to continue to invest in because, as I mentioned, not only is it going to grow the pie for the teams, as we just talked about, but I think it's going to add a new value creation opportunity for us to provide to either our existing partners or new partners that we don't work with today. So that's certainly one area. And then right now we're mostly domestic. And I think we have an opportunity for our company to expand significantly outside the US. And there's a lot of interesting different areas, Europe being probably the most similar from a sports ecosystem perspective to what we have here in the US. But likely that's going to be another area of expansion for us. And the cool thing about it for being such a young company is we're nimble, we're disruptive. We can pivot pretty quickly. We're not a big ship that's slow to turn. So we can attack a certain market if we deem it's going to be valuable for our partners and create new services pretty quickly.
Well, I wish you nothing but the best with all of those new endeavors, as well as the ones you've already got going on. And just want to say big thank you for sharing some of your knowledge and expertise with us today. Really appreciate it. And hopefully we'll get a chance to do it again someday.
Well, I appreciate it. It's always fun chatting with you. And thanks for having me. Really an honor to be here.
All right, Michael, thank you. And on behalf of everyone at Ticket Manager, thank all of you for watching and listening. And please join us again for the next episode in the All Access interview series.